There was a pastor in Europe a number of years ago, and he was going through a really hard time in his life. He felt very discouraged. It was night time, it was snowing, it was cold. He just went for a walk. He really had no idea where he was going and what he was doing. And in the dark, he suddenly heard this voice: "Halt, who are you and where are you going?" And as he sort of looked up in the dark, he could see a soldier with a gun at him. He didn't realise he'd walked into a military zone where you can't go. And this voice in the dark, "Halt, who are you, where are you going?" it changed his life. He felt in that moment it was like God was speaking to him in his darkness and asking a question. And this morning, if I was to ask you to come, I'm not going to do this, right? But if I was just to randomly pick a name, Joel, I'm not picking you. But if I was just randomly to pick your name and ask you to come out here, grab this microphone and tell us who you are without using your name, anything you do, anything that you would have others sort of like to think about you. But who are you really without your family of origin, the role you play in a family, without any of that? Who are you? And then, using the same criteria, tell us how you bring great joy to God in two ways in your life, but nothing external. We are very focused on the external in our world, aren't we? What we do. But when Jesus came up out of the Jordan River after his baptism, 3 out of the 4 gospel narratives record these words of God bragging on the boy. And this is what he says: "You are my dearly loved son, and you bring me great joy." Show me one thing that Jesus has done for God up to that point. Nothing. Not a miracle. No preaching. He hadn't even led a home group, right? Nothing. He's done nothing externally for God, and God is saying, "You bring me great joy." Are we missing something in the way we see us and our world and our relationship with God? I find it actually fascinating that John, and only John, when he's writing about this event in the life of Jesus, does not record a single word that God spoke over his son. He focuses completely on the impact that had on Jesus and how his identity was formed in that moment. How Jesus, who had never messed up, not once, if Jesus needed to hear the approval of God, the voice that reinforced his identity, if he needed to do that, how much more do we? How much more do we? I have had experiences in life with my beautiful wife when we lived in Sydney, and it was called shopping. And it was a delight to go shopping with Coral, to leave all the things that I wanted to do at home and just go out shopping. And when we would go to the shopping centre where people go shopping, I would find a little park bench where just all the people walk past. And while she was in the shop, I'd play a little game. And it was called Spot the Friends. And I was fascinated by, you'd have 2 or 3 or 6 people coming along, depending on their age group. And I would look for the mirror in how they had clothing the same as the person They didn't ring each other before they left. They said, can we go down the street? But they didn't say, what are you wearing? But it would be the same types of shoes. It would be the same sorts of hairstyles. There'd be something amongst groups of people that were friends that mirrored each other's fashion. Because we wear other people's clothes, other people's names. If you rush down to Chemist Warehouse near APCO right now, on special, you can get Katy Perry, not you, Kerry, sorry. But Kerry, you could do this. You could rush down there. You could get on special Katy Perry perfume. And if you don't want to wear Katy Perry, Delta Goodwin has her line down there. And for the guys, for the men, Guy Sebastian. For $9.99, you can get 30 ml of Guy Sebastian to splash all over yourself, right? Nothing will work for you, Joel. The fashion, sorry. You don't need it, Joel. You don't need it. The fashion industry is built around our search for who am I and our deep longing for acceptance. And that's not the only voice into our culture. That search for identity has left a generation of young people in Australia growing up very confused over a lot of things. But it's not just the young. I have a very close friend who is older than me and I've known for many years from the past, and he now describes himself as a woman. He identifies as a woman. He's changed his name to represent that change in his identity. And he told me once that by listening to his inner self, he's now found acceptance and support from a group of people that he once would never have gone to for that support. When we hear the words identity theft, we sort of imagine someone that's a scammer and they're trying to get access to our finances. But we can steal our own identity by what we tell ourselves about ourselves. And we do have an enemy. He's a scammer. And he only has to post on our timeline just a little thought, a seed of a thought. And we grab it and we water it and we repeat it over and over again, and we tell ourselves something that's not true and we allow it to grow, and it steals our true identity. It could come from something that happened in your childhood, a teacher, what they've said over you, a parent, a friend, just simply your family of origin can leave us with an identity that is not true. It's not true. And the only one who knows the truth about you, who you really are, is the one who made you. It's just that simple. Now, the disciple that we know as Simon, he got a name change. And that happened at his first meeting with Jesus. And in the narrative, it says that Jesus looked at him. It's the laser gaze of Jesus. It's a unique Greek word because it's to look with intensity. It's to look with understanding. It's to look into you. He looked into Simon and loved him and said to him, "You are Simon, son of Jonah." That's where you get your identity from. Your family of origin has left imprinted on you an image, an identity. And he says to Simon, "But you are Peter." When he said, "You're the son of," that Greek word literally means you share the same nature. Simon thought he shared the same nature as his dad, the character of his dad. And when Jesus described himself as both the Son of God and the Son of Man, he's describing his nature and his character, where it's come from. But he never ever says he's the son of Joseph. Whereas Simon saw his identity all in his family of origin, the son of Jonah. Jonah. No, it's Jonah. It's Jonas. It's a... Yeah, it doesn't matter. Whatever his dad's name is, you can make it up, right? Then Jesus did this thing that no one at the time was expecting. We know if we've read the story, but no one then was expecting Jesus to go, I'm going to change your name. And it's going to go from Simon to Cephas, which is the Aramaic, which is translated into Peter. Now, I used to think when I'd heard that story that Jesus was really saying, you are, but you shall be. And in a sense, that's sort of true, because for the next 3.5 years, Peter was enthusiastically into all the stuff that would get him voted as the most likely to let Jesus down. He did it with enthusiasm, but he was all over the shop. But then I discovered something. It's in Matthew chapter 6. And it's not long before, it happens just before, Jesus says to this Peter, you're a stumbling block to me, mate. Because you see the world through your own lens, but not through a kingdom lens, and you're not helping me. And he says that just after he asked Peter a question. And the question that he asks in Matthew chapter 16, he says to Peter, who am I? And Peter opens his mouth to work out what he's thinking. And he goes, you're the Christ, you're the Son of the living God. I got it. And in that moment, Jesus takes him back to that first meeting they ever had. And in that moment, Jesus says to him, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, son of Jonah. And explains why he's blessed. And this is what he says next. And I tell you, you are Peter. Not you will become Peter one day when you stop putting your foot in it. Not one day when you stop denying who I am. Not one day when you stop being a stumbling block to me and I have to say to you, Satan, get behind me. Not then. You are now. You are now, Peter. When we meet Jesus, when we really come to know who he is, we find ourselves. Not the person we will become one day, but who we really are in him. 97 times in your New Testament are the words in Christ recorded. And 35 times when that little thing is used, it's referring to our identity in him. There was nothing wrong with the name Simon. If you're called Simon, we have a Simon Alice in Ghana that watches Redgum regularly. Simon, there's nothing wrong with your name. It's a great name. Keep it. There's nothing magical about the Aramaic name Cephas, the Greek name Peter. There's nothing special about the name. They just represented two identities, an old and a new identity. And get this, only John tells us about that. No one else tells us. Only John describes himself as the teacher's pet, the one Jesus loved, right? That's his description of himself. No other disciple does that. Because John has experienced in Jesus the power of living out of his true identity, the disciple Jesus loved. I used to think that was arrogance, but it's not. It's humility. It's knowing who you really are and being appreciative of it, because it's an identity that's God-shaped, and that's why he's telling us about it. Now, last week, I gave a reason why even we as Christians have a tendency to run to our culture, to our friends, to our work, to what we do to find our identity. Now, don't misunderstand me. Our natural bias as humans to do life without God will take us there anyway. But it's not helped if we focus on an illustration that John gives us and we miss the secret source that enabled Jesus to do what he did. And when that happens, we think Jesus washed feet, which I spoke about last week. And I spoke about how at the Super Bowl in 2024 in America, they spent $20 million, a group of Christians, $20 million with images of people washing each other's feet. And at the end of that, it said Jesus didn't preach hate, he washed feet. And 124 million people that watched that ad were given a message that was only ever meant to be an illustration. In the 1990s, there was a thing that happened all around the world with a lot of Christian teenagers. They started wearing this wristband and it had 4 letters on it, WWJD. Does anyone know what that... Oh, I can see the age coming out. Is there anyone younger than 30 knows what that... You are fibbing, young Philip. What does it mean? What would Jesus do, right? That was what went around the world. The question young people would ask themselves, what would Jesus do? And the problem with that question is if that's the question, you will tell yourself, Jesus would wash feet. But John was not talking to us. He's not trying to help us know what Jesus would do. He's wanting us to discover, he's wanting us to find out what Jesus found that enabled him to do that. And this is what John tells us. Here it is. It's in John 13, verse 3, and it begins, because he knew. Because he knew. Because he knew that the Father, identity. When Jesus gave us a model prayer, he told us to start with our Father, identity. Our identity in him is just so important. And the rest of the verse goes, he knew that the Father had given him authority. These are things that he knew about. Authority over everything, and that he'd come from God and would return to God. Because he knew the things about him that he'd found out from the Father, he knew is the secret source. Now, they're John's words describing what Jesus knew. But he records Jesus' own words throughout his gospel. And John, and only John, records these statements of Jesus leading up to that foot washing night. And these are statements that John records about Jesus saying. He says this, I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the gate. Not I'll open the gate for you, come on in. But I am the gate. That is a very strong knowing of who you are in your true identity. He didn't get told that from the kids at school. And when he was on the tools, the other tradies around him didn't say, hey, Jesus, I reckon you'll make a great shepherd one day. Nobody told him that. Actually, maybe someone did. But he says over himself, I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way, the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. That's very offensive to every religion on earth. There's no wriggle room in that. Sounds like arrogance, but it's humility. See, arrogance is all about me. Humility is serving others. And those words are to bring life to us, to serve us. And he said things like, I am the vine. Without me, you can't do anything, including knowing who you are, your true identity. This may sound a little weird, but I once kissed the muddy feet of some of my friends. I was about maybe 13 at the time. My memory of exactly how it happened is a little fuzzy. I can't remember if it was a dare or what, but we had been swimming in this muddy dam, and when we got out of the water, all our feet were covered in this black, stinking mud. And I'm not sure if it was a dare or whatever was behind it, but I can remember getting down and kissing my mate's feet. And I did that because I didn't know who I was and I was desperate to be accepted. Jesus, because he knew who he was, because he found his acceptance in God, was able to wash road dirt off grown men's feet. I did it from the wrong way. Jesus did it out of wholeness in who he was. Now, I've never shared this with anyone before, but about maybe 10 years ago, in our church that we had planted in Sydney, we're in a community centre. And as I was walking into the foyer early one morning, the band was practicing, there was no one around, and I saw a cigarette butt on the carpet in the foyer, just sitting there doing its own thing. At the time, for about 10 years, Coral and I had been doing a cleaning job in Windsor, and I would get paid to sweep up cigarette butts. So picking up a cigarette butt is no big deal. I'd do it every week. But that Sunday morning, with no one watching, and no one, I've never told anyone this, I picked it up. And it was so powerful to me. Do you know why? Because at the moment I picked it up, I knew I was picking it up because I knew who I was. And I could do something and tell no one until this moment. See, when we know who we are, it's amazing what we can do and not have to tell anyone. It's life-giving. It sets us free. The Bible is not just a progressive revelation of God. In its pages, we discover who we are. And next week, I'm going to show you how literal that can be. So what John does in his gospel that none of the other Bible narratives show us to the same level is a story of Peter, so that we can find out in Peter, we can learn from Peter something. And he begins in the opening chapter of his book connecting the story of Peter and the story of Jesus. And then the final chapter in his book, the last chapter in John, it's all about Peter and Jesus. And the scene is a lake, and it's early morning, and Peter has gone back to his old identity. He's been fishing all night and caught nothing. Sounds a little bit familiar. Just something happened earlier in his life. And here he is. He's gone back to his identity as a son of Jonah that catches fish. And Jesus, the resurrected Jesus, appears on the shore. And everything else that happens from that moment on settles once and for all who Peter knows he really is. In all that took place that morning on the lake, he now knows his true identity. His past is sorted. His purpose has become clear. His potential goes way beyond all his teammates, what they thought he would ever do, ever. They'd given up on him, but not Jesus. And his future, his destiny is revealed to him. Now, this same Peter very cleverly writes a book entitled 1 Peter. It's original, isn't it? 1 Peter. But God takes this man and he uses him to show us something about ourselves, and he's going to show it to us today, about you, about me, who we really are. And every word in 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 9 and 10, every word is packed with old covenant meaning into a new covenant world, our world. And he begins with, you are, but you are. They are the same words that Jesus spoke over him at the start of his journey. You are. And this time, instead of it Jesus speaking over Peter, Peter is speaking it over you. He's speaking it over me. And he says, you are a chosen people, a chosen generation. That word generation literally means people that are family. You are a chosen people. I kissed muddy feet in a desperate desire to be accepted by my friends. How much better to be chosen, to be chosen, to be wanted, not just accepted, but to be chosen. That is life-giving. I was useless at football. I was always the last one to be picked, right? Some of you were the first to be chosen. It made you feel good. I felt bad. And he goes on, you are a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. When you find your identity, you find your purpose. Once you were not a people, once you had no identity, once your identity had been stolen from you, once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Now you have identity. Once you had not received mercy, now you have received mercy. And those words that Peter shares with us, declaring over you and over myself, are so powerful, so worthy of a deeper dive into them. We're going to start with those next week. We're going to have a look at them. Just the thought of you being a royal priest. I have a Maltese friend in Sydney, very committed Catholic, and he came to the church we planted a couple of times, and we were chatting, we were driving one day, and he says to me, do you do the Eucharist? Do you have communion? And I said, yeah. And he says, well, who takes it? I said, well, I do sometimes, and sometimes someone else takes it. He said, you can't, you're not a priest. He was really worried because he said, you're not a priest. He said, I know you're pastor of church, but you're not a priest. Every single one of us is not just a priest, but there's royalty. We're part of a kingdom. We're gonna look at that in a deeper way next week. But I'm telling you, what Peter shares with us, if we can get a grasp of it, you'll pick up cigarette butts when no one's watching, and you won't have to kiss muddy feet.